Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius, the official energy drink of pewterreport.com and the Pewter Report podcast. Happy hump day to everybody. It is a Wednesday edition of the show, and we just keep out cranking bangers as we are going into our fourth edition of a Bucs 7-round mock draft that was concocted by Pewter Report's Josh Capo and the face that runs the place, so we'll talk about in just a moment. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me is, like I said, the face that runs the place at pewterreport.com, SR Scott Reynolds. Scott, welcome back to the show. You ready to talk about another mock draft?
Yeah, it's always exciting in April because we do two mock drafts. We do one right about now, which is today, April 10th, and I put that mock draft in the chat. We're going to spend today kind of talking about the mock draft and go through the picks and some of the selections. And then we do another mock draft right before the draft itself. And that'll be on Monday, the Monday of draft week. And just since we're talking about draft, we've got a special deal that we call the PR Draft Show that we do every year. And it's going to be live from one Buccaneer place again this year. And we're super excited about that. The draft show is presented by Celsius, and that's going to be live on our Pewter Report TV YouTube channel. So all you have to do is just watch just like you're watching right here. And we're going to have wall-to-wall coverage. I want to say it's about 22 hours of draft coverage over 3 days. We start 1 hour before the draft on each day. So the first day, the draft starts at 8 o'clock. We go live at 7 with that hour preview. And then on Friday, we have a chance to talk to the Buccaneers' first-round draft pick if they make it. Sometimes they trade out of the first round like they did in 2022 with Logan Hall. And then the next day's draft on Friday starts at 7, so we'll go live at 6. And then the draft starts at noon on Saturday to wrap up, and we'll start at 11 a.m. to finish the draft show. But encourage all the Pewter people out there to log on and follow the draft with us. We'll have a lot of Bucs-centric analysis, plus a close eye on the NFC South. And without further ado, we're going to be talking about mock draft number 4 that we've done for Pewter Report. And Matt, I'll just people. Yeah, but 4's up, man. Fourth quarter here. Just to preface this, our job and what we try to do with our mock drafts is obviously take the Bucs' needs into consideration. Also, look at some of the players that they have talked with, whether it be at the Combine, the Senior Bowl, head in for top 30 visits, etc. And we try to make some calculations about who this team may be targeting. And sometimes our mock drafts, we don't really, I don't want to say we don't like the mock draft or we don't love it, but it's our job to put out people that we feel that the Buccaneers will have an interest in. We don't like all the Buccaneers picks. Sometimes they make some head scratchers, right? Robert Hainsey was one of those guys, kind of came out of nowhere. 3rd round right tackle out of Notre Dame, ended up moving to center. That was a pick that we just didn't see coming. Quan Alexander from LSU, 4th round pick back, in 2015?
Something like that.
Yeah, didn't see that pick coming. We don't nail all the picks by any means, but we have the best track record over pretty much any other media outlet when it comes to forecasting players, either in our mock drafts or our Bucs best bets. And Matt, we're going to be starting our draft previews later this week. So we've got draft previews and Bucs best bets all the way through, one every day up until the draft itself on April 25th.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Started working on quarterbacks just a little bit. So that'll be out on April 12th as we start with quarterback, and we go all the way to safety. Not going to get into special teams too much this year because they signed Chase McLaughlin. They obviously have Jake Camarda. But yeah, for those that maybe aren't as maybe interested in the draft as others, and you just focus a little bit more about Bucs football, and you want a quick, brief study up on some of the top players and those that the Bucs may be targeting, this is the perfect little preview for you. You can look at every single position. Whether quarterback will be important this year. We know wide receiver will, some of the other positions as well, especially offensive line. Let's face it, the casual fan isn't going to know every single offensive lineman.
Right.
So this is a great little cheat sheet, I guess,
Yeah.
if you will, to get ready as the Bucs get closer to their pick. And
Yep.
as I'd already previewed, like we did on yesterday's show, um, the live stream of the mock draft, or not of the mock draft, of the real draft,
Yeah.
is such a fun time.
It
Yes,
is.
it's a
I
lot of
love it.
Bucks coverage, but there is a lot of downtime, and that's a great opportunity for everybody in the chat as well. If you want to ask us specific questions about the Buccaneers, or you'll hear us comment on other things as well, it is a ton of fun. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to get into this mock draft 4.0, but I think we should talk a little bit about maybe Tristan Wirfs and Antoine Winfield Jr. as well, because
Yeah.
there's a bit of an update with their
We
contract
do.
situation.
And John Minke says, any update on whether Baker or Tristan are now fathers? Haven't heard anything. Yes, Tristan Wirfs had a little baby boy, and that was just a couple of days ago.
Yeah, last week.
Yeah, and I think Baker and Emily Mayfield still waiting on the birth of their daughter, so that should be imminent. And we'll see. Baker is going to turn 29 on April 15th, 17th, 19th. It's coming up pretty soon. He'll be 29. So he's got an April birthday. He's a Taurus like myself, which makes us hard to handle at times. But yes, Tristan Wirfs and Antoine Winfield Jr. Adam Schefter had a report this morning that Antoine Winfield Jr. is one of two players left from the franchise tag guys that has not signed a long-term deal yet. T. Higgins from the Bengals is the other, and there's some trade talks. I think he wants out of there. But with regards to Winfield, he wants to stay put, and he wants a new long-term deal, and the Bucs are happy to give it to him. Just working out some of the details now. I fully expect that deal, from everything that I've been told, will get done by July 15th, which is the deadline. Don't have anything newsworthy in terms of imminency, but I would envision that sooner rather than later, maybe before the draft, maybe after the draft, you'll see Winfield reset the market at safeties. Also, Buccaneers are also concurrently working on a contract extension with Tristan Wirfs, their Pro Bowl left tackle. Nothing imminent to report there as well, but keep in mind with Wirfs, he's already under contract, just like Winfield is with the franchise tag. Wirfs has got the fifth-year option picked up, so he's not going anywhere. And there's no deadline, Matt, to get a deal done there. So it might be a situation where they're focusing on Winfield now, and then maybe get to Wirfs a little bit later. And I expect fully he'll reset the tackle market as well. Laramie Tunsil, $25 million per year is the current highest paid left tackle in the league.
Yeah, I was curious thinking about who's going to get their extension first. Will it be Antoine Winfield Jr. or will it be Tristan Wirfs? But it makes all the sense in the world with the Bucs kind of having in their back pocket that Wirfs is going to play on that fifth year, where it might make more sense to get it done with Antoine Winfield Jr. first and then focus on Tristan Wirfs. As we just talked about, Tristan's a little bit busy right now enjoying the new addition to his family. So with Antoine, you can reset the market there. Then you can worry about Tristan Wirfs, and not even worry, I should say. And I don't think Bucs fans should worry either, because Jason Light, Jackie Davidson, Mike Greenberg, over and over again, whenever there's been a deadline or, I don't know if this is going to happen, they get it done time after time. We saw it with Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans this year. They didn't even hit the open market because they were able to all agree on a deal. I see no reason why this would be any different, especially knowing how great they are as players and how easygoing both Antoine Winfield Jr. and Tristan Wirfs are off of the field and talking to them in the locker room. These are players that are fantastic and don't carry around an ego that is detrimental to the locker room by any means.
I agree.
They're two great people to talk to, and I imagine it's not too difficult to negotiate contracts with them either.
Matt, you're in the locker room with me, right? I mean, during the season, the last couple of years, the only guy that has really been, I would say, a little bit of an outcast, and it's not like he doesn't have any friends, and it's not like he's a loner or a recluse. It's not like he was an outcast by any means. But when you look at the Wirfs and the Winfield and the Gedekes and the Diabys and the Kalijah Kansis, the guys that they've drafted, Cody Mauch, the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Even going back to the Vita Veas, right? The Levante Davids, the Winfields and the Wirfs. The one guy that just didn't seem to be like all aboard, was Devin White. You know what I mean? Just he was the guy that was the holdout, during the
Yeah.
offseason and all that. And I just don't know that there's another one of those Devin White types in this locker room. It seems like everybody just seems to be, yeah, I want to be a Buccaneer. I want to stay here. I love Tampa.
Yeah, I think it's the latter half of Devin's career with the Buccaneers that I agree with. I
Yeah,
think because let's remember, he became a captain in his second season with the
right.
Bucs, and that's sometimes tough to do. I get it; he was the fifth overall pick and everything like that, but sometimes that's tough to do to immediately become a team captain just
Yeah,
2 years into the league, especially when you're not a quarterback. So
right.
I think he was able to come into the locker room and form relationships, and obviously had a great relationship with Levante David. But I think something happened a little bit when they won the Super Bowl, which
Yeah,
obviously no Bucks fan would ever take back. I wouldn't take
sure.
that back either. I think the fame got to Devin a little
I
bit. If you
agree.
remember, he got that, Tom Brady had the Tommy and Gronky show, and then
Yeah.
Devin White had his own show that was like based around
It's
horses. And
like
I
giddy
think
up
the
or
fame
something,
got
or
him. I think the fame got to him a little bit where,
I agree.
he thought he was the man in town and he was a really good player,
Yeah,
but then you see some of the antics that we saw last season. But we don't need to dwell on him anymore because he's not with the Bucks.
right.
So we don't really need to talk about him until
So the
well,
Eagles game this
when the
year.
Bucks play the Eagles. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So and
Yeah,
that'll be some great drama when that goes down.
yep.
Um
Speaking of drama, let's go ahead and
yes,
take a look at our mock draft here, just to get things started.
let's do it
Um,
up.
okay, so we're going to preface this a little bit. If you looked at the graphic for today's show, and if you've read the mock drafts, we published it at pewterreport.com at 3 o'clock. Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma is the first round pick. And here's some things that we have to kind of take into consideration. And we didn't necessarily say this in the write up, and I don't know that we necessarily have to, but sometimes you don't always get what you want, right? It's not like we're saying take Tyler Guyton over Jackson Powers Johnson and Graham Barton and Leatu Latu, right? And, and players that might be there. At number 26, I've seen plenty of mock drafts where all three of those guys are gone, right? And we're
Yeah.
Brian Thomas Jr., the LSU wide receiver, is gone. And a lot of players that the Buccaneers might be fans of that might have high on their draft board are gone. They're picking at 26. So we have to kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And we typically do not do trade ups or trade downs in our mock drafts, right? We can do those individually if we want to have some fun, but when we do our official Pewter Report mock drafts, we stick and pick at all these spots. And we've seen Jason Lighton move up and down the draft board. He moved up to get Tristan Wirfs one spot. He moved down a couple spots to pick Vita Vea at number 12. He's moved out of the first round before with Logan Hall in 2022. So if you have to stick and pick at number 26, Tyler Guyton is a really interesting option because, believe it or not, Matt, the Buccaneers have a hole at left guard, right? No surprise. But believe it or not, Matt, this team has never drafted a guard under Jason Light. You have to go back to Kadeem Edwards
Yeah.
at out of gosh, where was he from? South Carolina State or something. That's the last time Jason Light drafted a guard. Every player that he has drafted to play guard has played offensive tackle, right? Whether it was
Mhm.
Ali Marpet out of Hobart College in 2015, whether it was Alex Kapp out of Humboldt State in 2017, Cody Malk out of North Dakota State in 2023. Those were left tackles. And then you look at Luke Gedeke. They tried to make him a guard. He was a right tackle. They moved Robert Hainsey from right tackle at Notre Dame to center. So Jason Light historically has not drafted interior offensive linemen. He has drafted athletic tackles and then moved them inside. And you and I both saw Tyler Guyton play some right tackle at the Senior Bowl. And I know he's 6'7", and people might say, well, Baker Mayfield's 6'1". That's not necessarily good to have him throw over a big sequoia. But if you look at his knee bend and his flat back, he's got great technique in terms of playing low and really maintaining his leverage despite being a big, tall, 6'7.5", 330-pound offensive tackle. But he's incredibly agile. He's very strong. He's got long arms. And let's not forget, Matt Filer was every bit of 6'6", 330 pounds. So this guy's literally 1 inch taller than you had Matt Filer, but he's a lot younger at 21. He's more athletic and he's a lot more talented.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Filer was pretty banged up in his career by the time he got to the Buccaneers, and I think that kind of showed when he got injured as well. But I like that this mock draft has kind of pivoted from, for lack of a better term, the usual suspects of guys that we've talked about, because I think it's important to look at different avenues. I think back to last year, like even doing my own mock draft, I had Darnell Wright initially going to the Bucs because I liked him as a player, but then the more the hype builds and the more events like the combine happen and things like that, he ended up going to the Bears much earlier,
right?
Where maybe the Bucs did like Darnell Wright, but he wasn't even available at that opportunity when they did pick Kalijah Kancey. So it became what are the Bucs going to do here? Because like the guys that we've talked about are no longer available. So I definitely do like this pivot with Guyton. You got to love the athleticism. That is the name of his game. And it's very interesting seeing a guy that big, as you said, 6'7", being able to be so athletic. Usually, and I think of this as basketball as well, the taller you are, the tougher it is to be like that athletic because you got to move around so much and your legs are trying to follow with your mind and your eyes of where you want to go. But he's shown, obviously, at his time with Oklahoma, and we know Baker Mayfield would certainly enjoy drafting another Sooner. The athleticism and the length are really his calling card, which would make him a nice addition to the Bucs offensive line. And it plays right into the script of what Tampa Bay and Jason Light does, as you said, drafting an offensive tackle, bringing them in, moving them to guard.
He's also a Senior Bowl guy, right?
Yes, also a Senior Bowl guy.
He met with the team formally at the combine, which it's interesting, right? Because you kind of scratch your head a little bit and you say, well, he's a right tackle at Oklahoma. They already have Luke Gedeke there. They're not going to move Gedeke back inside. Didn't work. Gedeke proved himself at right tackle. The other thing that's interesting about this pick, Matt, and we'll get to Richie P's super chat here. Thanks so much, Richie.
Yeah, thank you,
in just a second. But the value that he might have as well is, what if something were to happen to Tristan Wirfs or to Luke Gedeke? He has the size and the frame if you need him to move outside, right? And then start maybe Sua Opeta for a game or two at left guard instead. This guy gives you some real position flexibility. He is not just a guard. He is a guy that can play tackle with those long arms and his length and his athleticism. And so, you draft him to play guard, but man, you've got a guy that is a better prospect than just in school. And we saw even in the playoff game in 2022, the loss to the Rams, Tristan Wirfs didn't play. He was hurt the previous week against the Eagles. Josh Wells comes in, gets hurt in that game, and is hobbling around playing right tackle for Tristan Wirfs. It was a mess. So I think that this pick, it's a little bit outside the box. It's something Josh Capo and I kind of talked ourselves into a little bit, but it does check some boxes for this team.
Yeah, certainly. There is a little bit of concern. I think the fact that he's only started 14 games in his career, so he does not have the experience of some of the other players. But you could also, if you want to spin that into a positive and say he does not have as much wear and tear on his body compared to other players. And I get it, they're all young, they're all coming out of college. But if we have injury concerns about someone like Michael Penix, well, then we have to tip our cap to someone that is maybe doesn't have the experience, but does not bring in like a crazy injury history or just not being able to be unavailable for so much of it. So let's get to the Richie P's super chat. Thank you, Richie, very, very much. Who says, okay, so I like Tyler Guyton, grades well. I was big on JPP. I think you mean JPJ, Jackson Powers Johnson, early on. That said, I did see Lance Zierlein, whose pops was an NFL offensive line coach, have both Guyton and Graham Barton ranked higher than Jackson Powers Johnson.
Yeah. Again, it's listen, the Kalijah Kancey pick caught us off guard last year, right? Because he did not fit that Ndamukong Suh, Vita Vea type of mold that Todd Bowles has had here in terms of defensive tackles. He wanted something different, wanted something new. Instead of having like a big old, four-wheel 4x4 truck, he wanted a race car, right? So we got Kalijah Kancey.
Yeah.
And so this is a little bit of a different fit here. It's not the Graham Barton and the Jackson Powers Johnson picks. And we'll see. Maybe we'll go back to one of those guys on our final mock draft. It's interesting to note too, Matt, that as of today, April 10th, we do not know of a single offensive lineman that has visited the Buccaneers on a top 30 visit. I think there's 13 of those guys that are known, so it's less than half. But we have yet to find out if the Buccaneers have brought an offensive lineman in, not even a guard yet. So it'll be interesting to see. But we appreciate that super chat very much, Richie P, and thanks for your support.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And there are a lot of pretty highly ranked offensive linemen in this year's draft. I know we talked about wide receiver and how many great wide receivers there are this year, but even, and it says in the mock draft as well, Trevor Sikkema, Pewter Report alumni, has a wide range of offensive linemen that are ranked within the top 40. So seeing how this draft falls, especially with all the quarterbacks available, and teams do tend to panic at times where they feel like they need to draft the quarterback, even though you could.
There's going to be a run on offensive tackles too. It might be a situation where Tyler Guyton didn't even make it to 26. There could be a run on tackles.
Yeah.
The more tackles and quarterbacks drafted ahead of the Buccaneers, the more guys like maybe Graham Barton, Jackson Powers Johnson, Latu slide down. Maybe Brian Thomas. There's going to be receivers that are going to be taken in this draft as well. Quite a few of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we get to the second pick in this year's mock draft? Sticking with the Washington pipeline, as is tradition for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Checks the box.
Checks the box. Pewter Report is going with wide receiver Jalen Polk out of Washington, the wide receiver with this second round pick.
Yeah. So if you haven't watched Jalen Polk a lot at Washington, he was a 1,000-yard receiver last year. It was really a nice compliment to Rome Odunze. And the interesting thing about Jalen Polk is if you look at Rome Odunze, and if you were to take him and kind of morph him with Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU and maybe chop off an inch in terms of the height, that's this guy right here. Jalen Polk is a really exciting player. He is a downfield vertical threat, 6'2", 204. He's just a smidge taller than Chris Godwin. So those Chris Godwin references, they're in play for sure. And had 1,159 yards, 9 touchdowns last year, 69 catches. And it was just kind of a gradual build from him the previous year, 41 catches for 694 yards and 6 touchdowns. What I like about receivers is when they have a consistent average. It kind of tells you who this guy is. 16.9 yard average in 2022, 16.8 yard receiving average in 2023. That's who this guy is. He is a Mike Evans / Chris Godwin type. He has the contested catch ability that Mike has. Not as big as Mike, right? 6'2", 204, but probably a better contested catch guy than Chris Godwin. Can go downfield, has great tracking ability like Mike Evans does on the deep balls, but can really also operate in the slot. And he is a player that is physical and tough, kind of like Chris Godwin is in the slot. So he is a player, and I think, in some respects, Matt, like Trey Palmer, where they used him at the X, they used him at the Z, they used him in the slot. And this is another versatile player who's not going to get pigeonholed at one spot, but I love the touchdown production, right?
Oh, of course. Had 9 touchdowns last season. Every year scored more and more. Had 2 in 2020, only 1 in 2021, but limited playing time throughout. But then the last 2 years in 2022 had 6 touchdowns. And like I just said, 9 touchdowns in 2023. Also had 1,159 receiving yards on 69 receptions. And to a degree, I do like this comment from Kells 808, who said definitely got overshadowed by Rome Odunze. So he's used to playing with top wide receivers, which would be the case if he comes to Tampa Bay, playing with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And I think we'll find out about this Washington team that obviously was in the limelight going to the national championship game this year. Kind of like what we have said about Mike Evans, where at the time it was like, when coming out of the draft, did Johnny Manziel make Mike Evans, or did Mike Evans make Johnny Manziel? And
Great
we
point.
certainly found out that Mike Evans made Johnny Manziel.
Yeah.
I hope that all these great players on Washington have fantastic careers. Part of me does feel, though, that we'll find out, did Rome Odunze and Jalen Polk make Michael Penix Jr., or
Yeah.
did Michael Penix Jr. kind of make these wide receivers?
Right.
At the time, I'm leaning towards the receivers made Michael Penix Jr. better as a quarterback, but Polk's ability to go up and get after it obviously is a tantalizing prospect to look at for the Buccaneers. And again, it answers a need for this year and potentially a need for next season, depending on what happens with Chris Godwin. So I think if he's able to fall to the Bucs in the second round, maybe not sprint to the podium, but certainly start getting excited about adding a very talented player to your wide receiver room.
I agree. And, we talk about some of the fans here, the Pewter people, talking about possibly trading back, right? If you trade out of the first round again, you accumulate more picks. It could be a situation, Matt, where Jalen Polk is the top pick, or Malachi Corley, right, in the upper part of the second round. We'll see if those guys would make it down to the end of round 2, but it might be a situation where if they don't go Tyler Guyton in the first round, they accumulate more picks. Then you start to see a receiver like Jalen Polk maybe be the top pick, or a player like Malachi Corley. They did have a visit with Polk in Indianapolis. He did not remember if it was a formal or informal, but he was someone on the radar. The Buccaneers also interviewed formally Jalen McMillan, another Washington wide receiver, at the combine. So that, like you said, there's that Washington pipeline there. So that is the first day 2 pick for the Buccaneers. When you go into the third round, the Buccaneers have 2 picks, and one of those is their own. Another one is courtesy of the Detroit Lions for the Carlton Davis trade. And this might be a little bit of a surprise because of, you've already got a really good starter in Rachaad White. But Jason Light loves drafting running backs. In what round, Matt?
The third round.
Third round, yes, exactly.
Keyshawn Vaughn, infamously, going back to what you started with some surprising picks. I think Keyshawn Vaughn would be in that category as well. As
very much so.
Maybe not even necessarily the running back that they should have taken in the third round.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. So the running back that they only interviewed 2 of them formally at the combine. One of them was Marshawn Lloyd from USC. And this is a back that started his career at South Carolina and then transferred his final season to play for the Trojans last year with Caleb Williams.
USC to USC.
USC to USC. And had a ridiculous average in terms of his rushing statistics. Went from 5.2 his last season at South Carolina, where he scored 9 touchdowns, to 7.1 yards, and had 820 yards on the ground, 9 touchdowns. So he gets to the end zone. If there is a concern, it's the fact he fumbles the ball a little bit. He has 8 fumbles in just 289 carries in his career. So, but this guy can catch the ball. Usually when you look at a running back, and I want to say Rachaad White had a 10-yard average his senior season catching the ball, which is really good. Well, when you look at this guy, Marshawn Lloyd's receiving average, and he didn't have a bunch of catches. He was not a high volume receiver like Rachaad White was in college at Arizona State, but his last year at South Carolina, 18 catches for 173 yards. It's a 9.6 yard average, 2 touchdowns. And then at USC, catching passes from Caleb Williams, 13 catches for 232 yards. That's nearly a 15-point yard average, Matt.
Yeah, you're talking about the receiving stats. Having 7.1 yards per rushing attempt is really what stood out to me. But yeah, you want a running back that can do a little bit of everything. And Marshawn Lloyd would be an immediate upgrade to the running room, especially at RB2. And as we know, in today's NFL, you need more than one running back, because either one's going to get hurt or one's going to get gassed by the end of the season, and you're going to need someone else to fill in. We've seen across the league teams kind of having a 1-2 punch type of combination, and maybe Lloyd can kind of help be into that situation. He's good with just making one cut and going. He has the ability to make big plays. And as Brian S. says, Marshawn Lloyd has prototypical running back build. Love a 5'8", 220-pound running back. Arm tackle that bowling ball. Yeah, he's not like the easiest guy to bring down either. And that's why you see some of the big plays. And there's no secret that the Bucs need to upgrade the running back position, unless because sometimes I fall into a tough spot of like, where you need to upgrade, but also how much time do you give your players to develop? Now, Sean Tucker's a little bit different because he's an undrafted free agent. It's not like the Bucs invested too much into him. But unless Sean Tucker really blows everybody away during training camp this year and even OTAs and things of that nature, which you can only do so much. There's no contact and anything like that. Marshawn Lloyd, although I don't love drafting running backs in the third round like Jason Light does, there's no question this is one of those you don't even need to see it before you know that it's a good fit and an upgrade for the Bucs.
It's kind of a hidden need. It really is, right? And here's the one thing. I had a chance to speak to the sports club at Tampa Bay last night, and there's a statistic that kind of blew everyone in the room away when I was speaking last night, talking about the Buccaneers, their draft plans, and their prospects for 2024. These are the players that started all 17 games last year on offense. Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Cade Otton, Rachaad White, Tristan Wirfs, Luke Gedeke, Cody Mauch, Robert Hainsey. Okay. Every single one of those players started every 17 game. I mean, that's an amazing statistic. No wonder Bobby Slater got promoted to vice president of sports medicine, whatever his official title is. It's uncommon to have that many players, especially the skill guys, Matt, that get tackled, right? To start and stay healthy, every single game. And it's a bit of a luxury, and it's a little frightening, the prospects of that, because everyone stayed healthy and his team only won 9 games. I don't want to be like a negative Nancy about this, but what happens if there's an injury at running back and Rachaad White is down, as you've mentioned, you've got Chase Edmonds and Sean Tucker, and that's it. So you need somebody that has the ability to not just carry the load, but live up to that potential star power that Rachaad White has. And so drafting a running back on day 2, given the lack of depth on this team, I'm okay with it.
I know it's a wide receiver thing, but we are a long ways away from the great hamstring debacle in 2019 when like every single Bucs wide receiver had a hamstring injury, where Rashad Perryman was kind of the last man standing at the end of the season. But the Bucs were very lucky last season, especially on the offensive side of the football. And a lot of this offseason, I know Jordan Whitehead was the top, new free agent signing, if you will, but a lot of this offseason was dedicated to bringing back their top offensive guys, whether it was Baker Mayfield or Mike Evans. And there's still going to be a lot of change along the defensive side. I know a lot of it is for the better with upgrades at linebacker, with Devin White leaving, and outside linebacker with Shaq Barrett going to Miami after the Bucs let him go. But I wouldn't be shocked if there's a little bit of growing pains, just trying to figure things out with communication, which has been a huge issue for the Bucs defense, where why not just load up on the offense right now, where you have Mike back, maybe you get Jalen Polk or another big time wide receiver, and then score more points at the beginning. I'm not going to say it's going to take very, very long, but if there's a little bit of a hiccup with the Bucs defense early on as they figure things out, why not just make sure that on offense you are loaded up and good to go, whether it's the offensive line being intact, whether it's adding another star wide receiver, or if something happens to Rachaad White, bam, you're good to go with the running back that can keep you guys going like you never missed a beat, and who could, again, eventually be your starting running back if you don't want to pay Rachaad White after 2 seasons from now. So, again, it's another pick that's important for now, but even more important later on, because you want to have a player that's developed instead of just saying, oh, we got to pick a new guy this year. We got to pick a rookie and hope he works, because that's not a great recipe for success. Player development is super important in this league. And
Hope
running
is
back is one they got to do.
hope is not a strategy, and Jason Light does not have a great track record drafting running backs, right? Ronald Jones, Charles Sims, Keyshawn Vaughn, Jeremy McNichols.
Yes.
Rashad White's been the best one, and I think this team needs to continue to stock that position just in case there's an injury. Speaking of stock, make sure that you are stocking up
Yes.
on Celsius. Holy smokes, Matt. How many vibes are they up to now? Is it 1 million yet?
It feels like we're getting very close. Celsius, of course, is the official energy drink of PewterReport.com. The vibes are always very high on the show, and the vibes are even better when we're talking about Celsius vibes. They got some new vibe flavors, the Astro vibe and the Galaxy vibe. The Cosmic vibe's been out for a while, but a great flavor as well. My personal favorite Celsius energy drink that you can find is an Arctic vibe, and of course, peach and tropical vibes as well. All great, great, great flavors of Celsius. So if you need to know where to find a Celsius energy drink, go to the Celsius store locator on their website, punch in their address, and it'll tell you the closest location where you can pick one up. Could be a local Walmart, health and fitness store, or if you're lucky enough, it might just be your bodega.
Bodega.
And once you keep going to your bodega and you're like, wow, I really like all these vibes. I want the Astro Cosmic and Galaxy vibe, but I don't want to buy them one at a time. Can I get them in bulk? Yes, you can get them in bulk. That's when you go over to Amazon, click on the subscribe and save, get that variety pack because variety is the spice of life. You have it sent to your place of residence whenever you want. You're in charge. You're the captain. So make Celsius your number one pick during this draft season. Celsius, the official energy drink of the Pewter Report podcast. I believe we got another super chat to get to. Thank you to our resident commenter, Meets McGee. Always appreciate your contributions. Meets McGee with the $5 super chat says, got here late, but looking at the big picture, we really would need a number 3 wide receiver, but could DJ Chark be a good option?
It's a good question. I've never been a huge fan of Chark. He does get injured a lot. That's been a problem dating back to his time at Jacksonville, Carolina. He was injured. And right now too, Matt, we have the Buccaneers drafting Jalen Polk, right? So if you look at this wide receiver room, you have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Let's just look at it for this year. We know that Mike is only signed for 2 years. He's 30. He'll be 31 in August. We know Chris Godwin entering the last year of his contract. His future remains in jeopardy. But let's look at this year in the depth chart. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Trey Palmer will be making this team at some point, whether it's wide receiver 3, 4, 5, wherever he is. They like Raheem Jarrett a lot. You can't help when you talk to Todd Bowles and Jason Light about the receivers, they always mention his name. So those are 4 guys right there. Then you add in a Jalen Polk. We also have them drafting another wide receiver for competition and depth. I don't know that they need a wide receiver right now. I think that if for some reason they went through this draft, and you know what, there's going to be a position where they're not going to fill it this year. They're just not.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a numbers game.
Might not draft a running back, right? They might have to sign one or get another undrafted free agent. They might only draft one wide receiver. That might be a day 3 guy as opposed to a day 2 guy like we might be thinking. So he might be a player that they consider after the draft, but I don't think that they would look at him before the draft. They're going to go through the draft, see how many holes they can fill, and then see what's remaining, and then address free agency, because there's another wave of free agency after the draft when players get drafted. They're younger, cheaper, more talented in certain cases, and you see some veterans getting let go after the draft. And so there might be some other receivers that become available as well. We'll have to keep an eye on it.
Remember, that's how, again, this is talking about running back now, but that's how they got Leonard Fournette back in the day, is he was a late cut by the Jacksonville Jaguars. DJ Chark, I think he's a guy that really benefited from having 1 or 2 good seasons with Jacksonville, and there's still the hype around him that, well, if he can do this or he can do that, because I even remember in fantasy football being like, oh, I'm going to sign him as a free agent, bring him in as a free agent, put him on my team, and like, wow, what a steal. And it kind of just never came through to that.
Right.
It sort of reminds me a little bit of like they just be going down a rabbit hole of Russell Gage again, which I don't think they necessarily need. I would be in favor of, because I wouldn't hate, you obviously have veteran leadership with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and you got a good amount of young guys after that with everyone we just talked about. But it was nice last year when you had someone like David Moore that was in the mix. I wouldn't
I agree.
hate drafting a wide receiver. They still have to earn it, but pretty much saying that guy's going to be wide receiver 3. But then you still sign DJ Chark for really just like insurance purposes in case something happens to some of the guys ahead of him.
Rashad Perriman was that guy for several years, right?
Exactly. Just the Bucs have done that before. David Moore was the guy last year. Perriman, as you said, I wouldn't mind it just as a break glass in case of emergency type of thing. Even if you want him to compete for wide receiver 4 with Trey Palmer, I'm fine with that, but not as your wide receiver 3.
Exactly. Let's make everyone aware of a couple of upcoming guests we have on the Pewter Report podcast. We do have the rest of the draft to go. We have another 3rd round pick to get to as well as that, but we want to tell you about tomorrow's show, and it's going to have one of our former draft picks, Pewter Report's own Trevor Smith, who's now been with the Pro Football Focus guys for several years. Super proud of Trevor and his ascension up the national media ranks. Great guy, one of our absolute favorite draft gurus that we like to talk to. He'll be on talking about the Bucs' first-round draft strategy, and we're also going to be talking to Bucs general manager Jason Licht tomorrow at 1:00. So we will have some clips from Jason Licht. We'll get Trevor's thoughts on that as well, and we'll have probably more on Jason Licht's chat with the media tomorrow. On Monday's show, when we're also going to have Buccaneer players as the off-season program starts. It's not OTAs yet, but they're going to be lifting and doing the strength and conditioning stuff. They report Monday, April 15th. So we will be covering that on Monday. And then Tuesday, we'll be talking to one of those Buccaneer players, special guest inside linebacker Servassier Dennis, who had a very interesting rookie season, played a lot of special teams, saw some action late in the season, even got a start against the Indianapolis Colts later in the year. So we'll be talking to Voss and getting his opinion on the linebacker room and what he's been up to this offseason as he heads into year 2. And so stay tuned for those shows coming up on the Pewter Report podcast.
Yeah, we have a lot of great stuff coming up, and we've had a great week already. Greg Allman was on yesterday. We had Greg Cassell on the Thursday before. So we're still lining them up and knocking them down, and I mean that in a positive way, for sure. And then that'll lead us right up into the NFL draft and the Pewter Report live draft show for all 3 days. We promote that earlier on the show, but again, keep that in mind. Stay tuned. You never know what can happen in the draft and on the show as well. Who knows what Josh Capo's going to drink? He had the Will Levis concoction last year with the coffee and mayo and banana. So who knows? Maybe we'll do a new challenge this year. But a lot of great stuff on the Pewter Report podcast.
Servassier Dennis was a Senior Bowl guy last year. Marshawn Lloyd was at the Senior Bowl this year. That's another area where the Buccaneers love to cultivate talent from. This other guy, round 3, was another Senior Bowl participant. We're talking about Marcus Harris, the pass rushing defensive tackle out of Auburn. He is similarly built to Kalijah Cansey, probably a little bigger and stronger, maybe an inch taller, maybe about 10 pounds heavier, but very quick, agile guy. He's a one-gap penetrator, strong at the point of attack, strong hands. I mean, once he gets his hands on you, he can stack and shed from the defensive tackle position, throwing guards sideways and penetrating the backfield. 7 sacks, Matt, as a senior for the Auburn Tigers. And Jason Licht does like drafting Auburn Tiger defenders.
Yes, he does. A great history of that between Carlton, Jamel, KJ Britt. Marcus Harris is someone that I spoke to at the Senior Bowl. And you mentioned the 7 sacks, which are great. But I also enjoyed that was a huge jump from the year before where he only had 2 sacks. And the tackles for loss, which I think are more of a telling stat of a defensive tackle, went from 6.5 tackles for loss in the 2022 season to 11 tackles for loss in 2023. Also had 10 more tackles on the year, going from 30 to 40, and added a forced fumble and a fumble recovery as well. So that's a big thing I look for in a player coming out of college. And certainly there are different variables. Like some guys start from their freshman year or sophomore year. Other guys don't get that opportunity until they're a junior or senior. So not every storyline is the same, but for someone
Right.
that at least was kind of in the mix over at Auburn to improve year by year, I think is super important. He's a player that very, very friendly, like off the field, but a guy you do not want to mess with when he is lining up in front of you. And given the situation that the Bucs are in at defensive tackle, with really a make or break year for Logan Hall that we've talked about before, and Greg Gaines being back, but on a 1-year deal, it'd be good for the Bucs to have some stability at defensive tackle after Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey. And we know that they're the top guys. They're going to be the belle of the ball, the Rock of Gibraltar's, if you will, on the defensive line. But you got to build around that too. Say for everything we said about Rachaad White and what happens if something happens to them, we've already seen injuries to Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey, especially Kancey in his young career. The Bucs got to have a plan B and C and D, and I don't necessarily want just Gaines and Hall to be the next option.
And Logan Hall got those starts the first 4 games of the year when Kalijah Kancey was out and didn't do much, right? I mean, he was kind of a non-factor, so that gives you a glimpse of, wow, what if something happens to Kancey again or Vita Vea? You got to have another playmaker at the defensive tackle spot. Now, the Buccaneers have drafted one offensive lineman. That was Tyler Guyton, who we believe, if drafted, would slide over to left guard and fill that hole. But what about center? Getting some competition for Robert Hainsey. Well, say it with me. Senior Bowl center, Senior Bowl center, Tanner Bortolini, who the Buccaneers were having a lot of conversations with at his Wisconsin Pro Day, by the way. And Bortolini also interviewed with the team at the Combine. This is a player that has a fantastic mullet, so he fits in well with the offensive line and all the different hairstyles they've had, from the long hairs like Alex Kappa and Ryan Jensen, and
Cody Mauch. Yeah, Cody Mauch still carrying the flag for that.
Exactly. And this is a player that has some position flexibility, has played a little guard as well. But I think would be a really good pick in the 4th round. There was mixed reviews. Some view him as a day 3 center. Some view him as certainly a day 2 center. We think that there might be a possibility he might even be the 3rd round pick, but we have him in the draft as a 4th round pick. And again, it's another guy to throw into the mix. Robert Hainsey is in the last year of his contract. Matt, unless it's a 1-year cheap deal, I can't maybe envision this team re-signing Robert Hainsey. So you have to look to the future here with Tanner Bortolini.
Yeah, I believe he was in another mock draft of ours. So kind of becoming a late round draft crush of PewterReport.com. Certainly not the first guy off of the board, but with Hainsey, it feels like if any other team wants him, the Bucs will go, all right, like you can have him. So Bortolini, it's great that he's played center before, brings a lot of the traits that the Bucs look for in an offensive lineman, especially coming from an O-line factory like Wisconsin. There are just certain schools that either produce great O-linemen or certain schools that produce great defensive backs, like LSU and Florida State, I think, are in that DB discussion. But Wisconsin, their running backs and offensive line is kind of like their big claim to fame. So Bortolini, put him at center. You can play a little guard as well. Certainly a couple of options the Bucs can have, and a player that maybe doesn't start right away, but you have him, you develop him, and can produce for the team at a later date.
Meets McGee with the $2 super chat. Thanks so much. Who would be your out of left field 1st round pick? Well, Andrew, Tyler Guyton might be that guy that fits that mold a little bit, just because he's not really been linked to the Buccaneers much at all outside of our mock draft. I don't know that I've seen him drafted by the Buccaneers in any mocks. I would say another at a left field 1st round pick would be a cornerback, because
that's what I was thinking. It's like
we talked
any
about this before.
Back, really.
Yeah, you have to see the field to really make that 1st round pick bring value to the team. And right now, this team wants to get Zion McCollum on the field. They're paying Jamel Dean to be a starting caliber corner at $12 million a year. So those are your 2 starters right there. And then they drafted, or they signed Bryce Hall, who they liked coming out of the draft several years ago. And so I don't know. He's number 3. So where would this rookie cornerback, and I've seen Kool-Aid McKinstry, who came in for a top 30 visit. There's been some others. that have been bantied about in terms of linking between the Bucs and their mock drafts. I don't know. I don't see them drafting a cornerback in the first round. I could see them drafting one later in the draft because you could make the argument that Jamel Dean, unless he stays healthy and starts picking off passes, could end up with the same fate of Carlton Davis. But that's not going to be this year, Matt. That would be next year. So I don't know that drafting a first-round cornerback who's going to be sitting on the bench is a great value.
Yeah, or you're just starting a rookie at corner and Zion McCollum's, going to third string again, which, it's the NFL. Tough decisions got to be made, but you can't help but feel for Zion, especially what he did last year. So I agree. I definitely think corner would be the one where you scratch your head a little bit for sure, unless you're really thinking this is it with Jamel Dean, and then we got our options for next year, and you give him, another year under his belt.
Yeah.
So,
Now,
I like even wide receiver, you can kind of justify it with, having, a lot
you're
more.
start 3 wide receivers.
Sets. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I don't really know what else would be like position wise. What would be crazy out of left field? I guess like inside linebacker or quarterbck. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
Let's wrap up our mock draft here for the day, shall we? We're going to go to round 6 because there's no 5th round pick. And again, folks, sometimes with what we try to do with these mock drafts is present players that the team likes and put them out there so you're familiar with them. It's not necessarily who we're advocating for or who we want to have selected by the Bucs. The Bucs don't always draft players that we like, right? So this guy kind of falls in that category. This is Jordan Whittington from Texas in the 6th round. Gosh, he's played at Texas forever. I want to say he's a 6th-year guy. He's older, which, that's not exactly what you're looking for at wide receiver. But I will say this, injuries have really slowed him down. That's why he is going to fall till late day 3. And he may even be undraftable for some teams because he's had so many injuries. He was a Senior Bowl invite, Matt, but he wasn't there. You know why? He had a hamstring injury. So he has dealt with injuries, but man, he is a great athlete. He's rocked up, as you can see there, a very physical guy, and he is the heartbeat of the Texas Longhorns. I've done so much research on this guy. He is a team captain. He is a leader. He is the heartbeat of the Longhorns. He will do everything from run blocking to just going up and making high point catches. He did that, if you remember, when Texas was making that last-ditch comeback against Washington.
Yep.
They got down inside the red zone. He was the guy that came up with that catch. So this is a player that could come in, play special teams, be a great locker room guy. I think he would win the interview. The Buccaneers have been very interested in Jordan Whittington, from what we understand. They interviewed him at the Combine as well. I'm not in love with him as a pick. There are other wide receivers I like better on day 3. But again, it's our job not to advocate necessarily for players, but tell you who we think the Buccaneers are going to be drafting. And Jordan Whittington had all of 5 touchdowns at Texas, including 1 last year, but he caught 42 passes for 505 yards. His best season in terms of touchdown production was in 2021 with 3 touchdowns, but he only caught 26 passes for 377 yards.
It's interesting. I forgot what year it was. It was somewhere between 2018 and 2020, where it was like 5 out of the 7 picks that the Bucs made, all the prospects that they drafted were like team captains of the college football team that they played for. So the Bucs do love drafting team captains and players that are just willing to really do anything for the team. And Whittington is certainly a guy that has those traits that the Bucs would absolutely love. Best ability is availability, as we've said before, as a lot of the analysts say. So if he's healthy, could be a great steal. But that's why he's a late round pick, and maybe you stash him, let him go in the practice squad for a year, or he somehow makes the roster and is mostly just playing special teams. But a lot of great traits, not just as a player, that I think fans would enjoy.
Yeah, agreed. Meets McGee, $5 super chat. Thank you. I've argued with Bucs fans about drafting a cornerback. We appreciate that. Brian S. Jordan Whittington is the 5th option from Texas. I would like way after Mitchell, Worthy, Brooks, and Sanders. I agree with that. Bad W says Jordan Whittington will be an undrafted free agent. Very well could be because of his injury history. It is extensive, and it didn't help his cause the fact that he couldn't even play in the Senior Bowl or practice because of a hamstring injury. So that wasn't good. Last pick is a bit of a wild card because he's a really good athlete, but I've seen draft grades all over the board on this guy, and we're talking about Trevin Wallace from Kentucky. Very athletic linebacker, fits the Bucs mold. Instincts are questionable. Liam Cohen knows him better than anybody, having been at Kentucky. But you look at the stat sheet, he produced some big plays. 5.5 sacks last year, an interception, one forced fumble, 2 interceptions the year before. He has shown the ability to make some splash plays. He's got to work on tackling and playing with some power behind his pads to really stack and shed in the NFL run game and defend the run better. But he does blitz well. He's got speed. He fits that mold, and he can help on special teams while he develops behind the likes of Levante David and KJ Brett.
Yeah, the inside linebacker room is an interesting one because Levante, the Bucs will have him for as long as Levante wants to keep playing. You got KJ Britt. You have Servase Dennis, who will be on the show next week. But it's kind of like all over the place. Like, you're hoping KJ Britt will establish himself as like a good starter this year. Right. Servase is still relatively unproven, but you're hoping he develops a lot more this year. So I'm all for putting as many linebackers in the room as possible because one of them has to work out. We saw last year how important it was. J.J. Russell had to come in. Britt obviously took over for Devin White. Servase got to start. So I'm all for adding linebackers. I think the Bucs have gotten lucky with finding ones in later rounds as well. So, hopefully you can play special teams.
Luck is also not a strategy, especially when it comes to finding a house. You want a pro on your side, somebody that can give you a real strategy about finding the right home for you in the right community, whether it's in Tampa, Florida, or anywhere across the country. And that's Eric Gross, the official realtor of Pewter Report, the Eric Gross Group. Let them be your professionals when it comes to finding you a house to buy or helping you sell your house and get the most value for that. Their clients are not just transactions, they're lifelong friendships. Here's what I want you to do. Go to housesinfla.com. That's housesinfla.com. Check out their inventory, their open house schedule, etc. And more importantly, give Eric a call. Give him a call at 513-907-4271. Introduce yourself. Say, hey, I heard about you on the Pewter Report podcast. I know you are a big Tampa Bay fan. You read Pewter Report. You're on the podcast as well. Let's talk real estate, and he will do that. You can even talk some football with Eric. Very knowledgeable guy when it comes to his favorite team, which is, of course, the Tampa Bay. You know what? You can find him again on Facebook and Instagram at Eric Gross Group. And make sure you visit the website, housesinfla.com. Eric Gross Group, the official realtor of Pewter Report.
Before we wrap up the show, we'll get to that super chat in just a moment. After you check out the Eric Gross Group, make sure you're following us on all of our social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram. We are at Pewter Report, and our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. You can find our podcast 4 times a week, various clips that we have, and of course the draft show that's coming up in a couple of weeks with our live stream. Tomorrow's show, Bucs first round draft strategy. The prodigal son is returning home as Pro Football Focus and former Pewter Report reporter Trevor Sikkema is joining us. And next week we have Bucs inside linebacker Servase Dennis. So a lot of great guests coming up on the show. Grizz, thank you for this $2 super chat. Says slap a 45 on him, talking about Trevin Wallace, and call him Devin. That would be kind of funny if they go from Devin to Trevin. We'll see, but that's what makes this draft season so much fun. A lot of great different options that the Bucs could go with as they build out our team. All right, that's going to do it for us. Great show tomorrow with Trevor joining us. Plus, we'll speak to Jason Light during the day as well. So more Bucs news coming. Until then, for Scott Reynolds, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks to everybody for watching. We'll see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.